Anyway, we went through this process about 2 or 3 times. Got to a point with him that he was ranking number 1 for something like 24 cities, major cities in California for the term SolidWorks or SolidWorks licenses, etc. And the company SolidWorks, he was outselling the corporate entity
the corporate folks
just in his area in California. He was outselling the whole rest of the country.
Well, as business owners and marketers, as we're running campaigns, managing campaigns, looking at various things, it's not uncommon for us to have particular goals and objectives, specific benchmarks that we want to hit revenue-wise or just other marketing benchmark metrics-wise, whatever the case might be. Maybe help us understand how our attitudes or perspectives need to be when it comes to reaching certain marketing goals versus continually making progress, or maybe less about the finish line and more about the journey, because it seems like so much in marketing is more about the journey rather than just hitting a specific number.
Yep.
Any experiences or stories that
I can think of one. I can think of one. We were, this was a couple years ago, we were working with a company. In fact, they were also located in California, now that I think about it, selling AutoCAD software licenses, and very specifically for SolidWorks. And if anybody knows about SolidWorks, they're not cheap. It's like $25,000 plus per license, and you've talked to these architecture and engineering firms that have 15 people at their company that all need licenses. It's not a small sale. This guy at the time, and again, it was a couple years ago, was approved outsourced sales option for SolidWorks. And I want to say SolidWorks is located, their corporate headquarters were somewhere in the central U.S., like Chicago or
something like that.
I can't remember at the moment. But he was in California, and he said, hey, I've got this region that they're allowing me to have. And so I just want to sell more licenses, and I don't think people know who I am. So through just SEO, we got him to rank really well for any of those kinds of keywords that would draw in leads for those licenses in, I think at the time we were working about 7 or 8 cities at a time. And I want to say it was probably 7 or 8 months, maybe 9 months into it. We sent him a report, and the report said, you're ranked number 1 in every single one of these cities. And the guy was really happy. He was really happy. I remember catching up with him and shortly after that report, and he goes, well, what a fruitful relationship. I am so glad I hired you guys, but I guess that all good things come to an end, right? We're done. And I go, what are you talking about? Done? Look what we just did, right? Again, I was a little more naive and young in my internet marketing experience at that time. And he goes, well, I mean, we achieved the goals that we set out to hit, and I'm pleased, and I'm making really good money. I said, we're only done if you want to be. And he goes, well, what do you suggest? And I said, let's either raise your budget and continue to, bring in other areas or other locations, or let's target another 8 cities or something like that. Anyway, we went through this process about 2 or 3 times. Got to a point with him that he was ranking number 1 for something like 24 cities, major cities in California for the term SolidWorks or SolidWorks licenses, etc. And the company SolidWorks, he was outselling the corporate entity
the corporate folks
just in his area in California. He was outselling the whole rest of the country in his one area. Now, I mean, there's probably a higher concentration of people who could buy those licenses in that area. There's probably a lot of other pieces to that, but SolidWorks ended up buying him out for a very, very healthy sum. And ironically, he did then start another business and brought that business to us, and we did some marketing there and was successful again. And I think we're waiting. And that company got bought out a few years ago.
I'm noticing a trend where you get your hands on a company, do some amazing things, they grow, they get bought out, and the process repeats. That's kind of been it seems like the lesson on this particular AutoCAD business is set your marketing goals, set specific benchmarks so that you can track and measure and monitor your growth and your progress. But when you hit those, be ready to create additional ones and just stay focused on continual improvement, constant continual improvement to your marketing, and always be looking for different ways to expand and grow, kind of through those 4 levels that you mentioned. How can I get more people to see me? How can I get more of those people to click, call, visit,
Interact, engage.
Interact? How can I get them to interact and engage, but at a higher dollar amount than they normally would through upselling or cross-selling?
Sure.
And then number 4 is, how do I get them to come back a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth time to do it again and again and again?
Yep.
So those 4 levels are pretty powerful and pretty smart.
Yep. I don't like to brag. I'm not a braggadocious kind of person, but there was a time in our history where the only reason we had any cancellations was because a handful of our clients got bought out, and this is during that time. But in the end, we use this real simple thing, and we talk about this in our production and fulfillment meetings all the time. Is we set goals, and then we hit them, and then we ask ourselves, what's next? So now what? Look, you may have a goal. Maybe it's to hit $1 million in a year, or maybe it's to get 200 new patients in a month, or maybe it's to write 5 new policies per day, or whatever your goal might be. Okay, you hit that. Are you done? I would argue no. I would argue that you're not. There's some next step. Think about what that might be. So you're just one step, right? That was one step. But what's step 2? And then what's step 3? And then what's step 4? You got to be thinking about that all the time. And if you're not, because a lot of times the actions we take now will interact and affect what happens in the future. You can't just do all of your actions to just hit the first goal.
Yeah.
So a little bit of thought through it, a little bit of tracking, a little bit of how do we enhance this? How do we enhance that? And look, I know I'm probably going to shoot myself in the foot for saying this. It's not always about spending more money. It helps. It helps. I'm not going to argue that. But it's not always about spending more money. And you don't always have to increase your ad spend budget. You don't always have to increase your SEO budget. You don't always have to. Sometimes it's just enhancing some of the things you have, or making efficiencies and improvements on what you've already done. There are hidden gems or nuggets in your own yard, and you don't even realize it. And we often help people see that there's inefficiencies or pieces that they're missing out on. And so I would just argue that what you think might be successful, there could be more. I know that there's more, and we could probably help you find it, but it doesn't have to be just us. Just think about it a little bit.